Turn off your phone, close the door, put on headphones, get your notebooks out. We are going to write. Welcome back to the Virtual Writing Academy! Things are looking a little bit different today, huh? Well, I'm trying out a couple of new things, a different format for once, so let me know what you think in the comments. Meanwhile though, let's actually get class started! Last week, we were talking about character complexity by showing the way that characters can behave humanly by making mistakes and being selfish, and sometimes making horrible lies, like not keeping up promises. Now this week, we're going to be following up on that exercise. So if you missed that exercise, there's actually a link to it in the description below. I recommend you go and do it. It makes this exercise a lot more fun because you're following up on those very same characters. Of course, before we go anywhere though, for those of you joining class for the first time, this is the way it's going to work. This class is not a lecture. You're not going to learn by listening and taking down notes. Nope, you're going to be learning by writing. I'll give you an exercise, some sort of musical recommendation, and then you will write. Once the time is up, we'll meet again and talk about our experiences. There is, of course, a lesson hidden behind this exercise, but I will not tell you what it is until the end. Why? Because the best learning is always done by doing. So go get your notebook or open up your writing software of choice. You can minimize this video if you like. I'll tell you when to bring it back up. In the meantime, let me give you my musical recommendations for this week, which look an awful lot like the recommendations for last week. Also, as a aside, since we're doing a follow-up on last week's exercise, it's hard for me to not recommend the very same playlist. For those of you unfamiliar with me and what I do, I also make writing playlists over at hxr.com/mkieran, and these two playlists I think fit perfectly for tonight's exercise. Over there on the left we have After the Bomb, which is a really dark and somber playlist. It feels very lonely and very desolate because it's a dystopian / apocalyptic playlist, and it kind of works for this sort of moment. So if you think that your story is going to be heading down a really dark and somber path, I recommend After the Bomb. Otherwise though, if you want a little bit of an extra challenge, Writing About Love is a really lovely playlist, but other than that though, if you write it in a really sort of sad, sorrowful story, all of the songs flip around and become incredibly sad. A couple of you tried it last week and the results speak for themselves. You guys had a blast, and you know, I believe you, because this playlist, I was listening to it again and I realized that if you're writing a sad scene, all of these lovely songs don't sound lovely anymore. So there you go. For this week, I recommend After the Bomb and Writing About Love. Of course, if you head over to my 8tracks page over at 8tracks.com/mkieran, there's another playlist called Sorrow. It's also in the description below. That is just a pure, sad, grief, sorrowful playlist. So, you have that there. Again, it's down in the description below if you want to check it out as well. It's a little bit too sad for my taste, but hey, it's there if you need it. Other than that though, you are more than encouraged to use your own music for this exercise. Again, go get your stuff, go get your writing software, put on your music. I'm gonna give you about a minute or so to get ready. In the meantime, I'm just gonna be here, killing time, and I'm probably telling you about why I changed the format. Okay. For those of you who are staying in while everyone else is getting their stuff, let me tell you why I changed the format. One, because I think it looks a little bit better, a little bit more professional. And secondly, and most importantly, is because the VWA, the Virtual Writing Academy, takes a long time to prepare. I mean it, it takes a really long time to edit. And that's kind of the nature of the beast. So I realized, okay, I want to keep making more Virtual Writing Academies. I can't have them be like every 2 weeks. I love this segment and I want to make it a weekly thing. But it's really hard to edit it, and I'm really busy. I do a lot of things, particularly with the blog and Twitter and, my actual day job, which is writing books. So I thought, let's make it a little bit easier on me. And wow, that was a minute? Are you kidding me? Just really quickly, the main reason why I'm doing this is because now that the presentation, because I'm recording this basically live, I'm doing like a webinar, which is kind of preparing myself for the future because I want to do webinars in the future once I have a more stable internet. So this is just kind of like preparing myself for the future. It just kind of makes sense. And other than that, it's a little bit more casual because I'm not as scripted, And other than that, it's just way easier because since I'm recording everything live, I don't have to worry about placing images and sorting out images and After Effects and all that stuff. We're basically doing it live. And after fixing my light one more time, I assume you're all ready to go. So without any more beating around the bush, let's dive right in. As always, let me give you the formal disclaimer and remind you that you are indeed allowed to use your own characters in your own setting for this exercise. Feel free to adapt the exercise to fit into whatever you're writing at the moment. Whatever you need to get writing is fine by me. So what's today's exercise? Today's exercise is called The Return of the Liar. You will have 10 minutes to write from the point of view of a character who made a promise several years back. The catch? This character made the promise knowing they would not keep it. Double catch, they are about to meet with the person they lied to. Again, you're going to be spending 10 whole minutes writing from the point of view of the character from the previous session, except several years have passed and it is now time for them to pay for their crimes. Or is it? Now, as you're working on today's exercise, consider the following questions. How has time treated these characters? It is a really unfortunate thing to consider, but sometimes time is not kind. And yet, sometimes the things that used to be crimson, the things that used to make us angry, don't do that anymore. People grow up, scars fade away, and time eventually brings things anew. Consider that as you're writing. A second and a little bit more important of a question is, who did the lie affect the most? The character or the person they lied to? Sometimes the guilt of a lie can be even a more heavier burden than the lie itself. Consider that, because I think there is something to be said for the life of a criminal, the life of a person who clearly wronged someone and they got away with it. And sometimes they carry this burden, and it could be heavier than the burden of the person who was wronged. Not always, but keep that in mind. And finally, one of my favorite questions, I love bringing this up every time. If this person could go back in time, would they change anything? Guilt and regret are great things for characters because it is very human. I think there's a point in all of our lives that we wish we could go back and fix things. So, consider the moment from the previous session, the awful lie, and consider, would either of these characters do anything differently? In real life, it is an awful thing to make a mistake. It is an awful thing to lie to somebody. It is an awful thing to wrong somebody. But in fiction, it's these awful things that make for great drama. And as someone who enjoys character interactions, that to me is the meat and potatoes of my books. Characters interacting, characters wronging each other, and characters coming face to face and having to make tough choices. That to me, I love that. I eat it up. That's why I want to give you an exercise like this. Put these two characters who have a past with each other, and characters who each want different things. And it is now time for the showdown. Who is going to do what? Who can answer the questions I place before you? Who can tell this story and reveal to us the truth behind this awful lie that has transcended time and space? Only you can do that, fellow writer. But as always, let me give you a little help. Tonight's story begins like this. I knew the day would come, and yet I wish I had. As always, writerly friend, remember that only you can tell this story. So go bravely, write recklessly, and seek to find the truth. 60 seconds remaining. Alright, time's up! Pencils down, fingers off the keyboard. If you minimize this video, please bring it back up. Let's take a deep breath. I am level-headed enough to admit that sometimes I bury the lead. And I'm a very open person. And I know very well that tonight's lesson, I kind of, foreshadow it. I foreshadowed the hell out of it. And that's okay. I don't think tonight's lesson is supposed to be like a giant discovery, like a reveal, like, oh my god, I didn't know I learned this. I think tonight's exercise was a lot more personal and a lot more real. And I've talked about this on the previous episodes, and I want to keep making this point. I personally believe that character complexity arises from characters behaving in human ways. The one thing that I keep telling people is that they want their characters to behave humanly. They want their characters to feel like they're real people. And yet, I feel like there's this threshold where people... Wait, actually, I know what it is. I can blame English teachers again, finally. I believe that one of those faults boils down to the idea of the hero's journey, and is the idea that a character needs to have events happen to them in order for them, or have them overcome obstacles in order to become complex characters, or better characters, and that I don't believe that at all. While it is definitely one way, I don't think it is the way. My particular way, and the way that I enjoy telling stories, because ultimately this class is me telling you how I do things. Again, as always, this is not like gospel. It is ultimately me telling you what I do, what I enjoy to do, and what works for me. But when it comes to characters, though, to me, making characters feel alive is treating them like people. And when it comes to people, it is about conflict of interests, characters making mistakes, and characters acting selfishly. Or is that selfishly? Selfishly. I speak English, by the way. I try sometimes. But you have no idea how much... I've come to appreciate characters who truly act like people. Because I do feel like there are times in particular stories where writers want to maintain the protagonist group of characters as perfect people who don't make mistakes and have never wronged anybody. And, well, that's okay in particular forms of fiction, and it's fine if that's what you enjoy. No judgment. I love it when I see characters being people. I love characters who are selfish, characters who are bitter, and characters who are angry, because I can relate to those people. Because those are the human traits that all of us have. No matter how great your life may be, no matter how awful, how many awesome things you've had, there are still things that make you sad, things that make you bitter, and things that make you angry. And that's okay. That's what makes us human. But to me, I think these are the traits that we have to give to our characters, or not rather give, but allow them to bloom and to grow. I don't think any of you went out there setting yourselves to give a character a set of attributes. I think you went out there to see what they would do and see what would happen. I read a couple of your ideas on the previous video, and I love giving you exercises because I love how everyone goes in entirely different directions, and that is so much fun. It really is. So, to me, it's not as much as... This exercise is not really as much as the idea of trying to make complex characters. To me, the fun is to put X and Y and see what happens. Or another way to look at it is to take the TNT and a spark of flame and see what happens. One of the things that people keep asking me about, and this is as good time as any is tackling it. I'll make a full video on it once I talk about Durarara, which I think is an anime that actually nails this, but making a world feel alive, to me, boils down to having characters who behave humanly, because that's the way the real world works. You have tons of people who everybody wants different things, and there was a time when I was talking with somebody, a friend of mine who's a writer, and we were out in a public place, and I was looking at all the people, like tons of people. We're at a zoo, and tons of people. And I turned down to her, and I turned to her and said, "Look at all of the main characters in this huge story that we live in." And that's true, though. I think that there comes to a pitfall in stories sometimes when you feel that certain characters are safe, and when you feel that certain characters can't affect the story. I believe that a story, much like a character can become complex, a story can become complex when the choices of one character can directly affect another. Because, as I've mentioned before, to me, story is not about plot. To me, plot is the byproduct of characters making choices. Because, and again, it's one of those things where people believe that plot comes first. I personally believe that characters come first because they are the players in the story. They're the players in the game, and everyone is looking out to win. But to make characters feel complex and to have your entire story feel like it's multi-layered, I think you need to have characters who directly interact with each other. Not only like their choices, like, you know, choosing to kill one person over another person. I mean, simply the way they interact with each other. You know, right? You have experienced people who have been cruel to you, or someone who said something to you and that stuck with you forever. And every time a particular trigger comes up, you think of that very moment, and those emotions rush back again. Think about that. I think people forget about that sometimes, and it feels sometimes when you open up a book that this character was born on the first page, and that's not true. Which is, of course, another disconnection between stories and real life, because we want our characters to feel like real people, but if their lives have begun on the first page, then they're not real people, because your life didn't begin, you know, at the start of this video like my life did. Of course not. Our lives have been going on since the moment we were born, and actually probably before that, if you consider, you know, your line of this, you know, your ancestors and the world you live in and the history of the planet that you stand on. There is a lot to each of us, and that is what makes us complex. Was my hair messed up that entire time? Oh my god, how embarrassing. But regardless of all of that silliness, what I want you to get from, you know, this 2 sessions of exercises is the idea that, if anything, don't be afraid to let your characters be angry. Let them be sad. Let them be full of despair and full of hope if they need to be. Let those characters be who they are. Because I find that a lot of writers allow themselves to be limited by their outline. And you know how I feel about outlines. Outlines are just simply a story seed, a point from which the story is supposed to spring from. You know, you can't control your story. And I think that letting go of control is better, because ultimately it makes a more dynamic story. Because if it surprises you, it will surprise the reader. So next time you find yourself in a situation where a character is about to make an awful choice, don't hesitate. Don't second guess yourself. Go through with it. See what choices they make. See what mistakes they make. See how they change as persons, and hopefully, the other characters around them will do the same to them. Because I don't know about you, but I think these last 2 exercises have been really fun, even for someone who made them, because I think that the story you have created feels real. Not only because you have created a human situation where people don't get what they want and where people make mistakes and are selfish, but because the best part of all is that if you flip the story around, it would still make sense. And it would still be as entertaining, because that's the way life is. In real life, there's no good people or bad people. There's merely the protagonist of this story and the protagonist of that other story. We're all players in this game, and we are looking to win. As always, thank you for watching this video, and thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe if you want more. If you have ideas for future exercises, leave it in the comments below. I absolutely want to hear your opinions. We just finished character complexity, so I'm out to look for more ideas. If you have any sort of suggestions, leave them in the comments below. I want to read them. And of course, also feel free to share your writing and share your thoughts. I'm really busy all the time, but I try my darnest to read some of your thoughts and ideas, because, my god, it's really fun. I love seeing where all of you go. Aside from that, though, as always, if you want even more writing content, head over to my official writing blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com. And thank you. Thank you so much for witnessing this new change for me, this new change in the video format. I hope that it looks good. Let me know what you think. Aside from that, though, thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I hope to be seeing you soon. Mwah! So here's a fun fact about Max that you don't know, or you probably haven't noticed unless you actually like lived with me. But do you ever find yourself like going into like auto mode, or like while your body's doing something, but your mind is like effectively working on something else? I find that when I do that, I find myself humming one particular song, and it goes a little bit like this. If you recognize that song, you're a nerd. That's actually the theme from Freakazoid. The fun part about this story is that I didn't realize that is the one song that I go to when I'm doing like auto work until somebody else pointed out. I was doing it and somebody else was like, "Is that the theme from Freakazoid?" And I was like, "Holy crap, it is!" So there you go. That's the funny Max fact number, like, 699. Regardless of that, though, thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you later.